Hello, and a warm welcome to you all from wherever you are. My name is Ramin. I'm based out of the San Francisco Bay Area, and I am with Netlify as a Senior Solutions Engineer. Today, we're joined by Christian Bennick. Christian is a Senior Sales Engineer at Uniform, and he is here to talk all about personalization at scale with Jamstack Sites. Hello, Christian.
think, yeah, there we are. Hi, everybody. Good to see so many people online. And hi, Ramin. Thank you for having me today.
Excellent. Thank you, Christian. It's a pleasure to have you on and excited to learn more about how we can personalize our Jamstack sites with Uniform. We've heard some
Yeah,
exciting things and we want to learn how our customers are doing things today and share that information with the rest of the world. So here's how
absolutely.
our agenda is going to work, team. We will walk through what personalization looks like with a Jamstack site on Netlify today. And since we have Christian with us, he'll talk through how we can personalize our sites, make them super fast, and scale those sites globally. And I will talk through some of the Netlify pieces on how we can spin up a Netlify site so that it can be personalized with Uniform and so on and so forth. So with that, Christian, I'll turn it over to you and we can go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Ramin, and thank you all for joining us today. Just a very quick introduction on myself. I spent time with Uniform on a daily basis. Joined in December as a principal sales engineer. I come with a background of 6.5 years with Sycor and 10 years running my own software company, and also crossed paths with Avanade, building out a bit of their digital marketing practice in the Nordic region. And as Ramin says today, it's about Jamstack personalization, and in Uniform, that's sort of why we're here. So let's start out on today's webinar and try to sort of get us all on the same page in terms of why are we even trying to personalize, because personalization has been around for a long time, and that holy promise of personalization is basically the more personalization you do, the better you do, right? That's what we have been hearing on and on and on. Personalization is, of course, about how do we create better customer experiences. It's about increasing your average order value. It's about improving customer loyalty and creating better experiences. And at the end of the day, you could say that it's about making a bit more money off of the work that we do online every day. And then it's about trying to figure out how do we come to terms with doing personalization in a way that does not sort of make it too hard on us. What we see out there is that when you do personalization, there's an average increase in conversions at around 19%. And I would say 19% is not something that you just go and ignore. 19% is a significant uplift for, I would say, almost any business. Who wouldn't want to make 19% more conversions or increase your order value, average order value with 19%? This is, of course, just an average number out there, and it of course varies greatly. But nevertheless, when you want to do personalization, it all starts with good content, and content is what typically we see users really fall in love with, and how they fall in love with your brand. So you could ask yourself, why in today's world doesn't all websites out there basically come up with a solution to combining that really good content and the commercial aspects into this beautifully personalized and well orchestrated experience today? Well, in essence, let's compare this to how do we want to draw a horse. We all want to be able to draw that very, very intricate, beautiful picture of a horse. But in reality, we all start with those two circles on the top left, which is number one, right? Because where do we really start? Is it that hard? It is hard, and it is kind of difficult, but there are definitely answers to this. And I will be contradicting myself a bit, but we'll come back to that in a second. So my first advice would be, don't boil the ocean in terms of trying to come up with too intricate schemes for doing personalization. Um, we want to get to that beautiful image of a horse, but we need to start with the circles. And in reality, you could say and argue that personalization is quite simple. And then you could ask yourself, didn't that guy just say personalization is hard? Yeah, but I actually do mean that personalization can be quite simple. And I will come back to that a bit later. But first, let's talk a bit more about Jamstack. Ramin, over to you.
And thank you, Christian. I appreciate that. Let's lay the foundation a little bit. What does it mean when we talk about a Jamstack site, and how are teams and web engineering teams today building their applications so that it is fast, it is performant, it's scalable, and secure? To do that, let's make a comparison of how teams are most commonly building their sites today. They have a monolith architecture usually, which is problematic because your deployments for the front end has to really be tied closely together with the business logic, the backend code, as well as the database that you have in place. And when you want to make releases, you are dependent on other teams to really move forward. So this can really slow your time to market. Teams can kind of be in friction when they're working together, and it's not the best ideal scenario. So with the Jamstack, this new architecture that we are introducing, we want to decouple the presentation, the front end layer, from the rest of the application code. So Christian, if you don't mind, can you go move forward to the next slide where, thank you. And in this new my apologies, if you can go one more back, my screen was a little bit delayed. So in this new Jamstack architecture, we are decoupling the front end with the presentation layer, the presentation in the front end from the back end business store and the database. So code is pushed to production freely without having to make code changes and releasing backend logic in parallel. So you can go to production much quicker. In this architecture, now let's look at the infrastructure and the tech stack that we have. In a previous architecture, in a legacy approach, when a user makes a request to the browser, that request traverses a stack that goes through the CDN, the load balancer, web servers, app layers, and databases. And as depending on how large your scale and infrastructure is, you might add additional pieces of load balancers, web servers, uh, app layers, and databases to meet the demand of your customers and your user base. So this scaling with your legacy approach really means adding additional pieces of infrastructure, and that adds, of course, additional complexities to your tech stack. With the new modern way of developing these sites, the Jamstack approach gives you the ability to put as much of your site into the CDN. And CDNs are historically the more reliable part of the infrastructure. So if we can pre-build as much of our site into static assets, JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, and put it on a CDN, our site instantly becomes more reliable. It's instantly faster and snappier so that you have better conversions because users are clicking around to other parts of your site and staying around longer. And for your dynamic application, part of the applications, like let's say you have checkout or you need to bring information back from your database, you do not need to have web servers running entirely throughout the week when you might not even use a web server the whole time. So you can invoke microservices and Netlify functions as those requests come in. So with this new architecture, when we deploy our code to the edge, we have a much faster site and it's more secure. There's no points of presence to our database that can have SQL injections and kind of create problems for us. So this higher availability, more secure sites can also mean that we have lower costs for our application and maintenance of our of the ownership of this infrastructure.
Absolutely,
Yeah, thank you.
absolutely. So in terms of how Uniform fits into this whole Jamstack world, everything we do is targeted at building our solutions into to Jamstack technology, basically. And as I spend quite a lot of my time in a monolithic at a monolithic vendor, I'm very well aware of some of the downsides to server-side personalization and how that impacts performance. So when we do comparisons of how we do personalization today, and also think a little about why performance is so critical today, with all of this stuff that are going on around search engines and Google in particular, and how they utilize performance of websites to position you in the search rankings, etc., it is evident that performance is something that we cannot in any way, shape, or form overlook anymore. And edge-based personalization and personalization all the way into the client is just so much faster than what we have seen in sort of traditional types of personalization. So comparing to server-side personalization and third-party client-side personalizations, we actually sometimes see that the pages that we create with our type of personalization can be up to almost 100 times faster than what we saw in traditional server-side personalization. So it's just to emphasize that performance is exceptionally critical, and we cannot have that personalization interferes with that performance either. So Ramin, back to you.
Actually aware of the benefits of the Jamstack architecture and the development. So oftentimes we have teams that deploy their own pipeline for Jamstack sites and these front end applications. And the pipeline oftentimes looks like this picture, which you see on the screen. It's a bit of a simplified version. The more actual production diagram has a lot more charts and lines through it, which is harder and more complex to follow. But essentially, what we have here is that in a project lifecycle, you usually push your code to your Git repository. You have dev servers that you're usually developing on. You push that code to your staging servers and kind of confirm those changes before you go to production, and have oftentimes tests that you're running in that environment. I'll point out here, we see almost always that the dev servers and staging servers used in this part of the cycle is not the same servers that is used in production. So you have a bit of discrepancy in terms of performance and how your team is testing things in development and staging and until it makes it to production. So you're able to get, you're not able to have that clear insight into what our application is going to perform when we go to production, because you don't often have that matching environment in development. And then you piece together your CI/CD and your production environments, which you have. You sometimes might have a failover CDN in case of an outage with one of your providers, but it is very complex to manage your caching when you do those multi-CDN redundancies. And how does this work with personalization? And how do you make this performance for you on the front end at the presentation layer? And this stack really, again, leads to slow time to market. Teams, from the time they go from the dev server to production, can take weeks or months even, and can really affect conversions. Go ahead, Christian.
I was just listening to you saying this is literally the world that I lived and breathed for so many years, and the time to market in the solutions that we were building was just so painfully slow. And the whole part about the dev server, staging server, that whole sort of equation about figuring out what to do where and how to scale it, it was just a never ending pain basically, that we were struggling with. So I really understand the pain that you're speaking about here.
I'm definitely speaking from firsthand experience and pain as well. So how does this get? How do we move forward from there? How do we improve that workflow? And Netlify is really that piece of infrastructure or the product that really replaces your whole infrastructure and the whole developer workflow as it relates to the front end developer's role. So you have, as soon as the code is pushed to Git, you have unlimited dev servers and staging servers that can be spun up immediately, that are just as performant as your production environment. So as Christian was mentioning, you can really kind of be free and unleashed in deploying your dev servers for each individual developer, or maybe each individual feature or sprint, and have automated tests running on each of those environments. And really have a peace of mind with additional failovers that Netlify's high performance edge and CDN offers by being multi-cloud redundant and having instant cache and validation built into this workflow, so that if you need to roll back to a previous build with just a click of a button, you can do that in a UI or an API and have Netlify instantly manage that workflow for you. And this really helps teams develop much faster and go to market quicker. So some of those ROI, the returns of investment that you get from Netlify, is the coordination that you have to have is removed, and you free up your DevOps and SRE to not be so a bottleneck by the front end pipeline. Now they can focus on the back end infrastructure and other part of the projects and organization. But for front end devs that you're just pushing front end code into Git, Netlify can take care of everything else. I won't go through all of these points. Obviously, there's a ton of added benefits. But what does this look like when you bring in Uniform into the picture? Now, when you bring in Uniform, you have all of the additional benefits of Netlify with static build, instant rollbacks, going from Git to Globe with just deploying your code and scaling your unexpected traffic. Let's say you have 2 million visitors hitting your site in a successful campaign. There's no provisioning or additional coordination needed from your ops team. Netlify handles all of that for you with DDoS attacks and mitigation, and a CI/CD that is performant and built for front-end applications. That's always getting better as well. So that's Netlify's role, is to ensure your pipeline is constantly getting more enhanced and optimized. Now with Netlify, I want to give Christian an opportunity to talk about how we bring in Netlify into this picture, Uniform into Netlify.
Thanks. Yeah, that's all of the points that you just mentioned there are, of course, also why we are on a daily basis using Netlify also in our own product. What we do with Uniform as well is we basically help you as a customer to connect Netlify into your preferred Jamstack, basically, and allow you to fully get that freedom of choice in terms of how do you want to work with those front ends. So we don't impose any specific frameworks on you. You can choose from basically the top shelf of what you want to use, and utilizing all of those features of Netlify and front-end frameworks that gives you the ability to create sites with basically the fastest possible real-time personalization possible. And it's important to stress that this is real-time personalization as well. So we'll come back to how this is actually done, but it is picking up on the little teeny weeny signals that you pick up from your digital channels in real time, and instantly respond to how the visitor changes their journey. And we can also leverage edge workers to do the personalization, so we can support server-side rendering. You can push it all the way into the client, or you can choose to do it at edge workers as well. And because of the decoupled nature of Uniform and the decoupled nature of Jamstack, integrating third-party data is exceptionally easy. And as soon as you bring the data into the framework and into the tracker that runs in the front end, the personalization happens instantly. So once you have all of this running, you can basically do this with a no-code personalization. So there's no code for your business users to do this. You can tie it into your favorite CMS as well, so you can deeply integrate there and do your workflows there. So a lot of good benefits straight out of the box, basically. And then in Uniform, we also work a lot with basically decoupling the monoliths. So working a lot with Sitecore as the primary platform there, helping Sitecore customers to basically take steps towards a more decoupled approach when they run their solutions. And together with Netlify, we have quite a few joint customers that are sort of on that trajectory of decoupling their old-time applications from the monolith. So back to this whole point about personalization is quite simple. Well, it is, because in reality, you just have to provide your visitors with whatever they need when they need it. And that's, of course, sounds easy, but it's not always that easy to do. Traditionally, we have seen two different ways where you typically would start out segmenting audiences and basically try to do and start that personalization journey. And based on, again, on my own experience, the persona based way was what we traditionally did with agencies, and when I did this for a living as well, trying to describe and come up with these very elaborate personas, describe them, and then map them into different stages. Where would we then go and create the content? And it would become quite an elaborate desktop exercise. And to, unfortunately, many customers sort of just got stuck in these processes, and they never really got around to coming to a place where they could actually execute on their personalization strategy. What we do is we come at it from a different angle, which is through what we call intent-based personalization. And in reality, it's about trying to understand what is it that the visitor is trying to do. So if you think about personas or persona-based personalization, you can have two personas that have the exact same goal. So both of those want to if I was selling t-shirts, both of them want to buy a t-shirt. And it doesn't really matter necessarily whether you're a man or a woman. The goal and the intent is essentially the same. There might be varying degrees of how you want to be communicated for or at, but in reality, the intent is trying to figure out that you actually want to buy that t-shirt and allow the personalization engine to pick up on the signals so that you can sort of flow between different intents as you navigate through the website and thereby create that real-time experience. Setting up those intents and configuring the underlying value scoring mechanisms that we call signals, that's fairly easy, and you can get going really rapidly and thereby basically start executing your personalization strategy. Typically, we see this happening in the MVP builds as well now. So where we would see that in phase 2 or 3 of a project, we now see these things dropping into the MVP part of the project, which is a significant change from previous experience. So intents and signals is how we work in Uniform. The demo that I'll briefly show you later is a conference website that holds a set of intents. And an intent is, as I said, it is what is the visitor trying to achieve. If you're familiar with the framework of jobs to be done, a job to be done is a kind of a good analogy to an intent. So what is it that I'm trying to achieve when I come to your website? So on the demo site that I'll show you, we're operating with a few different intents. There is an intent that is about, do you want to attend the conference because you're interested in marketing talks or developer talks? There's also an intent that is related to a campaign that is going on, and an intent for whether you want to register or not. And all of these intents are based on signals. We'll home in on the intent to submit a talk in a little while. But before that, I would just want to emphasize a few examples that I sort of mentioned already. But it could also be, I'm interested in signing up for a newsletter. I'm interested in buying a product. I want to, get more information. Intents can be then based on different types of signals, and you can refine those intents even further through more advanced options inside of Uniform so that you can essentially decorate your personalization strategy with a lot of external data that you push into the personalization model through what is called enrichments. That is, however, outside of the sort of scope for today, but I just want to mention it in there. So what I'll show you is a high level demo, and there's of course a lot more in the platform that you can use as well. But homing in on that signal about submitting a talk. So for the conference, we of course want people to submit papers for interesting talks at our conference. We want to figure out which ones of our visitors have this intent. So a signal could be a lot of different things. A few of those could, for instance, be I'm responding to an email campaign. So we send out a specific email campaign with a very strong message. If you're interested in submitting a talk, then come to our website through this call to action. When I then come to the website, it's easy for us to sort of say that you're probably interested in this, and thereby start communicating to you about how do you then submit a paper for the conference. Another one could be I have data from previous experiences that might be stored in a CDP. It might be in my CRM system or somewhere else on my profile. And it has previously identified me as someone that is a tech expert. That is not the same as I'm probably someone that would submit a talk, but it at least puts you in a bucket where maybe you have the necessary tech expertise to talk on the conference. Another one could be I'm reading a specific page about that. Each of these different signals are configured in Uniform, and they aggregate into an intent. So an intent can have one or more signals, and they have different values, and they can then work with the intent in different ways. So they can either add or subtract value, or you can share signals across intents as well. So a lot of different options in there for you to work with. But that's all good. So where do you go to get started? So to get started, you would go to uniform.app and create an account. There's a freemium tier that you can use, and there you will be able to set up the demo that I'm going to show you in a bit. And if you have more elaborate questions, or you get stuck, you can always just drop me an email. When you go through the uniform.app and go through the onboarding workflow, what happens is that you have the ability to create a new project. A project holds essentially all of your intents and signals. And when you create a project, you can choose to deploy a starter Jamstack, which in this scenario probably would be the recommended path for most of you on the call. When you do that, you have the ability to sort of stitch together your own Jamstack. So you can choose your headless CMS, You can choose your Netlify hosting service. You can choose your static generator choice. And in this scenario, you could use Google Analytics as well. Commerce engines are coming and will be part of this in not too long as well. You could also choose to create your first intent if you have gone, read all the documentation or have something that is running on one of the supported platforms where you just want to basically enable Uniform on top of that. That is also a possibility. Once the Jamstack has been deployed, we'll take care of that for you, log you into all the systems and get everything running, set up your Git repo, and Netlify will then pull all of that in and basically do the build for you, putting Netlify and Uniform basically at the sort of center of stitching together your stack for you, so you don't have to do that. And Netlify takes care of the building process, holds all of that information. When you deploy this, you utilize the CDN from Netlify as well to run your site, and you can use all of the features and functionalities that are available in Netlify to add more features and functions to your website as well. So the website that we're working on is the Uniform conference site, and it's basically demo time. So for now, back to you, Ramin, to go through a bit of how Netlify looks when you go into the real world. So I'll stop sharing here, and the screen sharing is over to you.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you so much, Christian. That was great. Now I will go ahead and share my screen and give everyone a quick intro of what it looks like to deploy a new site on Netlify. So a new project that we can connect to our Git repository without having to spin up pieces of infrastructure or connecting any other complex part of the workflow together. We will automatically get a build pipeline and a CDN that allows us to go from Git to Globe very quickly. So the workflow to connect the new site to Netlify is very easy. We connect simply by connecting to a Git. We can choose any of these pre-existing providers. You can also choose your own self-hosted Git provider as well through Netlify CLI. And now we're just communicating with Git's API, GitHub's API in this instance. And I could choose any of these repositories from my GitHub account and add my build command. If I have any additional, environment variables that I need to add, I can add those here so that my first build can be successful. And if I'm using any serverless functions, I will also put which folder in my repository will those functions live. And as soon as I click deploy site, Netlify is now creating this project for us with all of the infrastructure that we need to really build our site. So we can see that it's already spun up the build infrastructure. We can cover this in a little bit as well. When Christian kicks off builds from Uniform, you'll see how Netlify will automatically kick this process off and build your site for you. As part of this, let me quickly show you maybe a project that has already been created. So now I showed you how easily it is, how quickly you can spin up a new project by just connecting to Git. But let's talk a little bit about existing projects and how multi-environments work on the platform, for example. So in here, I have production deploys for an existing project. And as long as I have additional environments deployed, I can toggle between those. So as long as I am adding any environment in my Git workflow, I can see those builds happening on my Netlify and I can toggle between those. And I'm going to make one more quick jump. I'm going to go into the application that Christian has pre-built for this demo. So let's go into this. And again, you can see that Netlify has all of the pre-builds statically generated and it stores them for history. So let's say Christian, on his latest publish, he realized that there was a typo. So when we go to this application URL, welcome to Uniform Conf, let's say there was a typo on there and Christian recognized that. He can preview the deploy. So there's a unique URL pointing us to that previous build. Let's say it was not the previous build. Let's say it was the very first build. You can still do that. You have that preview deploy functionality for as long as you need to create a snapshot of your site. In addition, when you need to publish those changes, it's a one-click button. I'm not going to do that now to not. Christian has already set up the demo as is, but when we click publish deploy, you can instantly roll back to a previous version of your site, and Netlify instantly invalidates the cache for you across all edge nodes to ensure that your users are seeing the latest content without the front end developer having to, or the DevOps person having to clear cache or manage the cache invalidation strategy. And one last thing I'll quickly cover is, now that we have our site spun up, we have deployed the site on Netlify, and we're able to consistently get new builds triggered on the platform. How do we add new environments to the platform, to the site as well? So in your development or workflow cycle, you will have additional environments that you want to deploy. Right now, we're only deploying the production branch, but for example, if Christian was working on a new feature, he can say feature 2021, and that branch would now automatically get deployed on Netlify every time there's new changes. And you can have unlimited additional branches added so that you can easily spin up new environments and enable your devs to build. There's not just the environments that Netlify offers you. There's the developer workflow, and a ton of additional benefits in this process. And let's talk a little bit about how Christian is building his site today and how it's personalized on Netlify. So maybe getting an overview of that workflow from your end, Christian, and how you are able to kick off builds from Uniform.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Absolutely. So let me present my screen here and take you through sort of a more full-on demo of how Uniform works and how we do personalization and how it's all wired up. And then I'll do the demo. We'll go into Uniform, do a bit of configuration, and then we'll kick off that deploy in Netlify. And when we do that, Ramin will be back and talk a bit over the build, what happens there. And then we'll come back and see how that deploy now allows us to change the personalization on the website. So from the get-go here, as I told you about before, this is a simple conference site that we built, and we naturally want attendees to our website, and we want people to talk at our conference. So we send out this email campaign, and someone clicks on it and comes back to the website. As they come back to the website, they come back to the website through a call to action of some sort that has been decorated with a campaign URL of some sort. This is pure configuration in Uniform, what we're sort of looking for. And as I get back to the website with that, we use that to personalize. On the site here, we personalize the hero, which for natural and obvious reasons is very evident to see what is going on. We're also personalizing and surfacing relevant content when I actually start expressing specific behavior that is related to whether I want to attend the marketer related to talks or the developer related talks. What happens in the background here is essentially that we accumulate value from a signal. And remember from before, a signal is a sort of a descendant of an intent. So I have a query string signal that the tracker framework is listening for or looking for, and it has a value and it has a scope for how long this data is kept in the browser and how often this can be triggered. So, Uniform is built basically privacy first, so we don't push data anywhere unless you as a customer or developer choose to do. All of the data gets stored in the browser and decays over time depending on how you configure that. So right now I'm basically storing this in my browser. So that can be in a cookie, it can be in local storage or in IndexedDB, depending again on your need. If you are utilizing edge workers for personalization, you would need to store data in one way. If you just want to, for instance, like I do here in the demo, I do personalization in the client, then I can push it anywhere in the browser I want to. And we do have integrations that allow us to push events into Google Analytics so that you can track your personalization and testing in there, and you can use those events also for remarketing essentially. So right now I have 25 points or 25 in value against a certain intent, that is the call for papers. As no other intents have any value, I see this. And I figure out this is, of course, the conference of the year that I want to attend. So I go through and want to register. We're not sort of showcasing how to do registration. We're basically showcasing that when I go through registration, what we do here is we trigger a value into a cookie, and we're looking for a specific value in a cookie, and that has a business value the Uniform conference, and we now use that for personalization instead, because this is more valuable from a business point of view. It takes over from the other intent. The next two things I want to show you is essentially based on my behavior. To sort of more easily do that, I'll just click forget me here. So I'm basically back to where I started now. For those of you that are super interested in how this actually works, once you go ahead and set up this site through the Uniform app account that you have, I urge you to take a look at the dev tools and check out the console. In the console, you'll be able to see all the scoring being tracked in there for demo purposes. And you'll also be able to see what we call the intent manifest, which is essentially the raw configuration of the personalization features set up in Uniform that as part of your build on Netlify gets basically bundled into your JavaScript load. So once this is deployed, there is no third-party scripts, there is no third-party cookies, everything is first-party, and everything is running basically as fast as possible because we're running either in client or on edge. So let's take a look at how behavior looks. I'm going to navigate between these two pages in a different or in a pattern that allows me to sort of build up different behavior patterns. And as I do that, we'll also take a look at the actual content down here, where we'll start to surface content that is more relevant to me depending on whether I want to attend the developer or the marketer track. So let's start out on the marketer side. So I visit a page that is related to marketer related content. It has been tagged actually in my CMS that is fueling this experience, and it has a value to me of 50. So coming back to the front page, I now naturally see the marketer hero, but also note that the talk tracks has changed slightly. So it's now more relevant to someone that has a larger interest in the marketer tracks. So going to the developer page and coming back, we now see a developer hero. So again, we're now mixing and matching because we don't really know whether you're more into developer or the marketer track. So let's check out the scoring. So they're equal now. And the reason I see the dev hero rather than the marketer hero is because personalizing with Uniform is sort of at the end of everything. It's about choosing a specific element in a list of potential elements. And if I have equality in value, I will choose the first one in the list. So the developer hero is basically above the marketer hero in the list. And that is why we see this right now. As I say, the talk tracks is a mixed bag of talks because I have a mixed interest here. So let's go back to the marketer page again and see what now happens. Now this takes over again, but it does not just take over, something more happens, because what we're surfacing now is some specific content for someone that is interested in marketing, but it is for someone that has consumed additional marketing content than just visiting a page. How fast this happens is all about how you configure the value that you score per instance, that per time, or per, what do you say, yeah, as many times you see it, you basically add the scoring, and it can be a value of from 5 to 1,000, basically, depending on how you want to scale it. And if I then start to consume more content for marketers, you'll see my intent value rises. As I come back again, it's still 100. Clicking back again, I'm now over 200. So that basically shows you how Uniform can help you not just do simple personalization, but it can also help you trigger personalization that is based on a deeper interest in a specific topic. If I now started visiting the developer pages on and on and on and on, and my value would rise above the 200 that I have in marketer now, then I would be back on the developer track. So with that, we sort of come full circle on what I would want to show you in the front end now. So let's shift gears and go back into my Uniform account to show you how we can work in there. And then from there on, we'll trigger the build and see how that then flows into the front end, and and how we can trigger a new personalization. So what we want to do here is we want to create an additional intent. So I click the plus sign over here and say, we call this the Netlify intent. We save this. And now I have an intent that is ready for me to put signals into. And as I mentioned before in the presentation, I can have one or more signals in here. So I start with a signal. I want to have a query string signal. And the reason I choose it, it's just easy to trigger, basically. So I want to give it a name, and I give it a query string parameter, and we'll just call this the Netlify UTM campaign. I want to give it a value of 100. and I want to increase the score when this happens, I could also decrease the score. Think about a scenario where you have visitors navigating your website. Some pages should increase scoring because they're relevant to a specific intent, but other pages might subtract or decrease the score in the same intent because they are sort of showing that the visitor might have a different interest over time if they continue doing that. So you can sort of juggle around with the scoring. You could also choose to use the remove all intent score, which is, imagine a scenario, you go through a funnel. As you go through different steps in your funnel, you emphasize and strengthen the intent. But as you go through the funnel and come out through some sort of conversion at the bottom, you basically want to remove the intent scoring from that funnel because now you want to start basically communicating about something entirely different. So we got that covered, and let's just trigger frequency every time. So now we're back and have the intent set up. We have the signal set up, and now I just want to click publish. And when I click publish, we go basically and trigger our build through Netlify through a webhook that we have configured. So back in Netlify and just refreshing the page, we now see the build taking place here. And Ramin, so you can take us through what is going on here now?
Yeah, certainly. So here we can see that Netlify has spun up the build infrastructure necessary to build this site. So we're installing the necessary packages and environments, and we'll soon start to run the build command. And once the build command starts to run, we're going to install any of the package JSON dependencies, create redirects, proxies, and headers if there are any, as well as Netlify functions, and deploy those to our multi-cloud CDN. In this specific step as well, in this build step, you may have additional tasks, like you can see in step number 3 right there. There's a on-post command that is running a Netlify build plugin. Netlify build plugins are a very important part of the build infrastructure or the build step, because you can add any additional actions to your build command. Like you can run lighthouse scores on every single build to make sure your score is above a certain standard, or web dev scores. You can have Cypress end-to-end testing take place within the build step here and kind of run your marketing checks and unit tests. You can have Algolia build plugins indexing your site with all of the additional attributes. So you don't have to write code. And the way you do that, Christian, if you don't mind, maybe if you scroll up to the top of the page, there's a plugin section I just want to quickly highlight. So go to the white space and then scroll up, maybe. Might be a little bit easier. So if you go up into the deploys tab, the plugins section, and this is what I was referring to in the plugins build directory, you have the list of all the plugins that you can install with just one click of a button, right? So Cypress, and if you have other frameworks, like you're working on a Gatsby build, Netlify will install your Gatsby essentials or Next.js essentials. So this is an important area where you might also be able to build your own build plugins. If you're deploying a lot of applications and have to take repetitive steps, you can just install build plugins for your organization as well. So that's Netlify's build infrastructure, giving you the ability to spin up builds anytime. And as you saw, Christian running his build, and it already finished in 45 seconds, and we have a preview deploy for it available so that he can quickly see the changes. So Christian, maybe you can talk what changed here specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just go back. I want to emphasize one thing here in the build as well, because remember I just briefly mentioned the intent manifest. So part of the build is pulling the intent manifest. And what we did in Uniform was actually update that intent manifest. So that intent manifest updates a specific file in your code base that then gets built into your payload. So that JSON file essentially contains the configuration of the personalization intents that you've set up with Uniform. And what happened then over here, if we just refresh the page and take a look over here, what we did was we deployed an additional intent for Netlify. So if I now say, what happened if I came to the website through a UTM campaign that has the Netlify value, then I would see this hero instead on my homepage. So that essentially brings us full circle in terms of demo. So what you saw was how we do personalization in a Jamstack site with Uniform. completely decoupled, running entirely either on edge or in client. It also supports server-side rendering. Of course, you saw campaign, you saw cookie-based, you saw behavior-based. What we then did was we shifted gears, went into Uniform, and went over the configuration in Uniform, deployed that through Netlify, and I just briefly explained to you how that intent manifest basically ties together the personalization, and showed you how that now gives us the ability to personalize in a completely different way on the front end. And I guess with that, we're sort of at the end of our planned presentation, and we now have a bit of time for Q&A. So I think
That was great. Thank you, Christian.
What's going on in the back to do the Q&A?
Yeah, that was great, Christian. Thank you. I think there was one question Andrew had. I think he was trying to follow along with the rest of your demo, and he was wondering what the original UTM source query you used was. Maybe if you have that information for him.
Sorry, what was the original UTM code I used?
UTM source query that you had used in your demo before you switched it to Netlify.
Okay, yeah, sure. That was just it was called Uniform Conf, basically. So let me share my screen again and show it. Here, just
Perfect.
a
Thank
second.
you.
I need to find the right window here. Hang on. We're getting there. And you should see my screen now. Correct? Yeah, you do. Good. So the original one was essentially for campaign. It was called UNFRM Conf that triggers this hero. And what I did was then I created one for Netlify that will trigger a different hero for me. And in Uniform, if I look into the personalization, the call for papers campaign was essentially configured in the same way as the one for Netlify. So it was looking for a specific query string with a specific value, accumulated a value of 25 into my call for papers campaign intent. So exactly the same as I did for Netlify. And I just didn't mention there's quite a few other signals available in the freemium version that you can use. There are some limitations as to how many intents, etc., that you can use in the freemium version. I hope that answered the question.
Great. Thank you.
I see that Netlify has its own CMS. How does Handshake compare to Netlify CMS? No idea.
Good question. Netlify does have its own open source CMS, so you can certainly use the Netlify CMS, which is Git-based approach to create sites, spin up sites, and get those sites into production. It has an admin editor workflow, so it's great for getting new projects up on the from the ground and into production and quickly live. Where Netlify CMS might differ from a lot of the other headless CMS approaches is it is not it doesn't have the enterprise support that you may expect from CMSs, since it is an open source solution. So if you're looking for something that could be used maybe more in production, that you have an account team with, maybe open source Netlify CMS might not be the greatest fit, but it is a good fit for starting new projects on Netlify.
Andrew has a question. Would Uniform be able to route traffic to completely different URLs for A/B testing purposes? Uniform does also provide A/B testing, Andrew. We didn't essentially speak about that at all, but A/B testing is an integrated part of the platform, so you can set that up directly in Uniform. You could absolutely just route traffic somewhere else. It would essentially not be the role of Uniform to do that routing. You would handle that somewhere else. But there's nothing that hinders you from adding a separate A/B testing tool in there. But as I say, it's part of the platform already, and you can just set it up and run A/B testing. What you would do then is you would essentially set up the test, and then you would do the A/B test either on layout or component level, or however you want to do that. So I hope that answers your question. Then we got Jenna asking, I'm interested in a marketer's experience. If I want to change content in a page or change a page layout, can I just, whoops,
Yes,
that disappeared.
So yeah, Jenna, I think that's a really good question. How can you have a CMS experience that allows you to drag and drop the content and get the job done? there's a lot of CMS options out there. I'm sure Christian will have his favorites as well that get this similar job done. Like you can drag and drop images and sites and build your site that way. But what Netlify does with these CMSs is still taking all of the content that your content editors pre-build with drag and drop, and it takes that into static assets and deploys that to the multi-cloud CDN. So it's always up, always redundant, and always fast. Christian, what are your thoughts on this? Any?
No, my thoughts are sort of what you just said, but essentially with Uniform, there's quite a few CMSs that you can use. We have deeply integrated with a good handful and have integrations available, sort of open source-ish to an additional handful. So there's about 10 different CMSs that you can use directly with Uniform to do the type of personalization that you have just seen. Essentially, that integration is a custom field that goes into any CMS basically. And as part of your build, you then pull out the relevant information and combine those things. So the integration is very simple to do. And you can use essentially more or less any CMS, but we don't support all of them. As I said, there's about a 10-ish that we do support these days, and more are coming on all the time. So I hope, Jenna, that answers your question. Tom, you asked the question. We might miss it, but how do content editors manage the different personalized content that is shown based on the intents? That is all happening directly in the CMS of choice that you use behind the scenes. For this particular demo, I used Contentful. So I basically do all of the content editing in Contentful, and I tag content in Contentful with the intents from Uniform, and I do set up the personalization specifically for instance, for the hero in Contentful as well. But in the interest of time, we pulled that out of today's demo because otherwise we would have needed to spend an additional 10 minutes to put that in there as well, and we want time for questions as well. So I hope that answers your question, Tom. But feel free to set up an account and spin it up, and then it's easy for you to see how that would work in a real life scenario. Yeah, next question. There are quite a few, which is good. Robert asks, can Uniform be used with Data CMS? We don't have an out-of-the-box integration with Data CMS. I don't have any specific professional knowledge about it, but if it has I would say if it has a proper API, then yes, you could definitely do that integration. Typically, a shallow integration that just does the custom field is maybe half a day's of work or so, and then you're good to go. Other questions?
Yeah, great questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Christian, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, send me an email. That's the easiest way. On christianb@uniform.dev or cb@uniform.dev, or just go to our website, uniform.dev. There is a form on which you can drop your information, and we'll get back to you ASAP and leave any question that you want basically there. That's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me.
Perfect. Did I get your email correct in the chat besides the slash?
Yeah, absolutely.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for joining us, Christian. Yeah, and that was Lisa. Any other questions for us today?
Let me just, Ulysses, you have too many redirects. When I try to log into Sanity from Uniform's dashboard, it's Ulysses. It's not an error that I have seen before, to be honest. Too many redirects. Yeah, drop me an email, Ulysses, and let's figure out what it is. That's the easiest thing to do. You have my email in the chat. Just drop me an email. I'll get back to you in a few days. I'm pretty busy these days, so give me a few a few days because yeah, there's quite a few other things I need to get done first. But drop me an email and we'll figure it out.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Christian. Thank you to all of our viewers, listeners for joining us today. We hope you're doing great, and this was a valuable presentation for you all. Please don't hesitate to reach out to Christian with any follow-up questions you may have, to Netlify with any platform-related questions. We're here to support you all and be partners in this journey as you go headless and personalize your Jamstack sites.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Ramin and Netlify. That's great. See you all. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Take care, everyone. Have a great one.
Yeah. Take care out there.